What is up, basketball fans? Welcome to a live NBA outlet. I'm your host, Nick Fay. Full house today. With me, as always, Kory Waldron, regular guest, Jack Manuell, and Jorge Cantu. How are we doing, guys? Happy birthday to Kory, though, real quick. Yesterday was his birthday, turned 25, quarter of a century. Hopefully he makes it to 100, but he's trying new things.
Yeah, BECs. I'm trying bacon, egg, and cheeses, and I'm Steve Kerr year. Not a lot of good basketball players have wore the number 25. Let me just say that. I had to really go hard to find a winner.
What's that cholesterol, bro?
You're getting old, bro. Jack, a quick question. How many bacon, egg, and cheeses have you had? You've been to the U.S. a lot. Kory's only had 2, so we're trying to do a quick little poll right here.
2. I like have them at least once a week almost. I love bacon, egg, and cheese.
So, Kory, step up. But over to the list. Before we get started, quick reminder, check us out, iTunes, Black Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. But Kory and Jack have been doing an excellent job. They created OTG's top 50 players. They did this at the beginning of the year. Now this is kind of a mid-season edition. What we're going to do is kind of break down the list, going through each player, and well, let's get right into it. And we'll start off with number 50, and that's Jason Tatum. Thoughts on that, fellas?
I mean, we expected Tatum to be much better than this after last season, I guess. But I think it's a fair ranking. He maybe could have been out of the list for that matter, because his performances have not been up to expectations. I would have liked to see Lou Williams in that number 50 spot maybe, but I guess, give or take, still fair enough. Not much to complain about there.
Yeah, at the time, Lou Williams was probably not even top 3 in the sort of 6 man of the year race. Spencer Dinwiddie, Domantas Sabonis, these sort of guys a few weeks ago. So obviously an ever-changing list. The list can change, upon a whim. Kory and I were debating guys like Trae Young as well. His form has tapered off a little bit. So it's a list of the moments, almost like a time capsule of essentially what our thoughts were at that point in time. And I think if we could have changed it, we could probably change it today quite easily.
Yeah, I mean, I know, just thinking about guys, honorable mention guys, like Lou Williams is a name that comes up. Otto Porter Jr. is a name I think comes up. Zach LaVine's a name that comes up. Trae Young comes up. Kyle Kuzma comes up, I think.
I have a couple more. Should I bring them up right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're right at 50. Yeah,
I had Buddy Hield. Maybe, well, Nikola Mirotic could have cracked the top 60. Maybe. I mean, of course, guys like John Wall, Kevin Love, Oladipo. I'm pretty sure they didn't make the list because of injuries.
Yes, correct. Correct. Okay. If you're out for the season, you're automatically disqualified from the list because you're not playing. This is based on solely this season and guys who are active.
Yeah, it's an exclusive list.
It makes sense. Yeah. I think guys like Lou Williams, Buddy Hield, those were like the top 2 candidates that were like just borderline, maybe top 50 guys. But given how things have changed in the last couple of weeks, I think that it's still fair enough, right?
Yeah, I think Tatum was safe at 50. Like you guys said, this is probably the hardest spot because you have guys that you're looking to bounce in or out. Buddy Hield, like you said, Lou Will, Trae Young, guys to definitely consider. But Tatum obviously is still a very good player, and even though he's not living up to expectations, he's still having a pretty good year. On to number 49, Clint Capella.
I figure out he could be a little bit higher, but he missed so much time with injury that there's not much you can complain about, because he's been a big part of what the Rockets are doing this year. Even when he doesn't quite fit the stretch, the 3-point shooting team that the Rockets have, he still does such a good job of killing everybody inside. And I mean, he deserves to be in the top 50 players.
Yeah, Yusuf Nurkic, Steven Adams, Miles Turner, these sort of guys are around that sort of similar range, just sort of near top tier sort of centers. And I think the main thing was Clint Capella's health. And he whenever he is healthy, and also the other day he got bodied by DeMarcus Cousins, so I guess it kind of looks good for our list, so to speak.
Yeah, I think if he was healthy for this last stretch, he'd probably be a little bit higher. But with missing time and just getting back, I think this is purely fair. Kory, any thoughts?
No, that's you guys all hit the nail on the head. His injuries limited him. Obviously, when he's out there, he's a double machine.
Yeah, next guy on the list, number 48, John Collins. I was very happy to see him on here. I felt like this is a low-key guy that doesn't necessarily get the love. So thoughts on that, guys?
He missed a couple of games to start this season, maybe some 10, 12 games to start, but then he came back and he got off to a super hot start, and he's been able to keep up the nice performances. Definitely deserves a spot in here. As I say, you can give or take a couple of spots, but he definitely deserves to be here. Big part of the big leap that Atlanta has taken this year, without a doubt.
Yeah, he's outstanding. He's got a really bright future, and I remember people were sort of talking about him in the Eastern Conference as like a fringe all-star candidate. So he puts up numbers, tremendously talented player, has a ways to go in certain facets of his game, mainly defensively, but he's an incredibly talented young kid.
Yeah, the defense is what kind of hinders him at this point, but obviously the offensive versatility is what you love. He can do a little bit of everything. I think he's a nice complementary piece alongside a guy like Trae Young. Like, they're going to be a lot of fun for years to come. So 48 was good, and I think it was hard not to have. It was hard to have John Collins on though, and not Trae Young as we went farther on into this list. But again, Trae Young has had some really nice stretches and then some really bad stretches, so he was just outside of it.
That was literally going to be my next question, because I think you could have probably maybe swapped Trae Young, but like you said, when you guys made the list, it was like pretty much pre-All-Star break, so this kind of, held him back a touch in terms of that. But on to the next one, number 47, Spencer Dinwiddie.
Well, what can I say with the two net studs in here about Spencer Dinwiddie? He's had a phenomenal season, both coming off the bench and when he's got an opportunity as a starter. He's one of my favorites, like low-key DFS plays. And for those of you that follow my fantasy stuff, when he's kind of cheap, I always earn the side of, Spencer Dinwiddie, because that's always bringing it. That, like, the scoring, he's just so talented. And, his height allows him to get a lot of advantages over most people. So he definitely deserves a spot in here without it.
He should be the sixth man of the year, but obviously that thumb injury probably takes away from him. Lou Will being healthy all year and just putting up insane numbers off the bench. But I think Spencer Dinwiddie is a player you would rather have on a playoff team, a guy who is a point guard, a guy who can go to for a bucket. I might be biased. I am biased, obviously. And I did predict the fact that he could be a sixth man of the year candidate in one of my first pieces for Nets Republic. So I think he's had a sensational season, and he's continuing to grow, and we've got him on the cheap. So I think it deserves to be on this list.
Yeah, so being obviously a sixth man of the year candidate, obviously the Nets having so much more success than predicted, big part of Spencer Dinwiddie being there for the Nets. The injury is what really set him back. He actually probably could have been a few spots higher on this list had he not gotten hurt with that thumb injury. But Spencer Dinwiddie has definitely proven himself to be a top 50 player, because the Brooklyn Nets are locked into the playoffs, and it was based off his performance early on this season.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Kory. Certain points of the season, he was the Nets' best player, also one of the best isolation players in the league just from the eye test, and also the stats back it up as well, also super efficient, so no complaints here. If he was healthy, maybe a couple spots higher, but obviously we're going to show Spencer some love. Next up on the list, 46, Gallinari.
Gallinari deserves a lot of credit because he's been haunted by injuries for the last couple of years, and it's just been like terrible watching a guy with so much potential. Obviously, it didn't work out in Denver as they planned because of the injuries, but now that he has a chance to be kind of like that guy for the Clippers, now with Tobias Harris out, he's like kind of like the main guy, one of the focal points of the offense, and he's continued performing in big ways. Like, both he can kill you from the three-point line. He's 6'10" if I'm not mistaken, so he can also take it inside. He can grab boards. He does a little bit of everything and at a high level, and he's a big part of why the Clippers are well in the playoffs. I have no idea how they got there, but he's a big part of it.
Yeah, it's story time with Jack now, because I remember one of my first ever podcasts with OTG with the outlet was a LA Clippers preview with Kory, Waldron, and Nick Fay. And I wasn't necessarily against the Danilo Gallinari side. I was a bit high on him. I sort of liked it. I think that he could be a nice complementary piece. And that for those 12 months, for those 6 months of the season, I looked like an idiot. Let's put it that way. And, another 6 months later, 12 months later, I feel validated now. He's in a top 50 list for OTG basketball. So, F you to Kory and Nick Fay.
I was waiting for it. I was like, when am I going to get the F you?
So he's having a bounce back year, but if Blake Griffin was still there, the contract would still suck.
Yeah, but he's not. But at
the time when we had the discussion, Blake Griffin was there, and the biggest criticism Kory and I had was the fit. And right now, we look back, DeAndre Jordan, Blake Griffin, Gallinari, still trash in my eyes. Like, I wouldn't want that as my front court. Like, that's just too slow.
Yeah, but maybe I just could foresee that Blake Griffin just wasn't
No,
going to
no,
work.
no.
Yeah.
DeAndre,
You got a third eye now, huh?
He found a way to get it done.
I'll give him props though. Nice to see him healthy finally for a full season and just kind of bounce back. Obviously, over 40% from the 3-point line, which is huge for somebody that size. And
He's in shape. That's the big thing. He actually is in shape. He moves around a lot better on the court than years past. We felt that we had to have at least one Los Angeles Clipper in the top 50. Arguably, maybe it should have been Lou Will, but Gallinari's had this kind of resurgence this year, and he's been crucial to any success they've had. And obviously, they're a playoff team.
Yeah. And got to give him a lot of props, especially after trading Tobias Harris. Guys, as we run through some of these, obviously we don't have time to talk about everyone. We'll be here for a couple hours. So if it's good to go, Jorge, just say good to go. We can just move on. Andre Drummond at number 45.
I do have something to say about him. Maybe should be a little bit higher, but he's just like his limitations are so he's so limited in terms of his skill set that he's a 20-20 guy, maybe on a nightly basis, or a 15-15 guy, however you want to look at it. But with the inconsistencies, I perfectly understand why he's in this spot, and he deserves to be in the top 50, but maybe a little bit higher, but I understand.
A lot of his success came after when they made the list. Like the Detroit Pistons really picked it up, and this list was kind of already made. So I'll cut the guys some slack on it.
I will say, I will say this is one of my few chances I can throw Jack under the bus. Jack did not have Andre Drummond in the top 50. When we originally were dissecting this list, I had Andre Drummond, I think right around this spot, maybe a spot lower. And then I was like, Jack, no Andre Drummond. And Jack was just like, yeah, I'm just not a big fan. And for a lot of reasons you said, Jorge, I mean, he's limited offensively. He's not necessarily a great rim protector. But for me, being a league leader in rebounding and just the fact that he is a 20-20 machine on certain nights, I think that does warrant him in the top 50. But this is a guy who, depending on who you are, is polarizing. Because I know I've heard Zach Lowe been really critical on Andre Drummond on a loss they had against the Kings, which Nick, I think, mentioned on one of the last episodes of The Outlet that we did. So he is kind of a polarizing figure, but I think the rebounding for me is what kind of solidifies him as a top 50 guy. If you're grabbing 15.5 rebounds per game, there's just not many guys who can do that.
I think he's definitely probably one of the maybe more inconsistent guys on this list that can really upset you because he can go from having a huge game to a bad game.
Yeah.
But I would say, based off his current play, maybe up a couple spots, but when they made the list, I think it's fine. Jorge's boy, Richardson.
I mean, I'd like to see him higher, but fair enough. Nothing else to say.
Anything from you guys? Obviously, you're good with it. Yeah. So, Jamal Murray.
I think he's good.
Yeah.
Good to go over there.
Same for me. Miles Turner, number 42.
I've voiced my opinion about Miles Turner before, Kory, and it's going to kill me. But I do think that he might be a couple of spots down in my own list. I know this is not my list, but in my personal opinion, just because I don't know, there's something about him. I saw his numbers and then I understood why he's a part of here. But with a couple of guys that were on the last spots, maybe you could go up, down personally, but still, I understand why he's here.
I mean, I definitely agree with you because having to watch Miles Turner on a frequent basis, he is at times rather frustrating because it feels like he can be a lot more than he already is. Obviously, you see the fantastic rim protecting. You see the fantastic defending. I mean, he can really guard guys. He had a defensive set against Tobias Harris last week, and he pretty much stuck with Tobias Harris on a complete drive from the three-point line. He was able to stick with them. Offensively is where you're lacking stuff. Rebounding is where you're lacking stuff. But yeah, I can definitely see a point for people thinking he could be a few spots lower because I feel like at times we're looking at his potential more than what he actually is.
Yeah, I think the defense gets him higher on where he's at on the list. Yeah. His offense, he could be more aggressive, but his defense gets him there. Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, he's a top 5 defender right now. I'll probably have him top 5 in defensive player of the year. I'm not sure. You could probably have him maybe second, third if you're being optimistic about him. But I think that, and I value defense incredibly highly. He changes the game on the defensive end, and the fact that Pacers have maintained such a high level of defensive acumen has been majorly because of him, even in the absence of Victor Oladipo. And I think the one thing that probably was a little bit worrisome for Pacers fans and fans in general is the fact that Joel Embiid just absolutely destroyed him. So if you want to be, an all NBA level defender and caliber player, you can't sort of let those performances sort of happen. You have to be like, Rudy Gobert. You sort of got to hold it down a little bit more, make it a little bit trickier. But Joel Embiid is a sensational, probably one of the best centers in the league anyway.
Yeah. Unfortunately, every center cooks his ass. Unfortunately,
yeah.
It feels like the top centers.
It feels like the more physical guys will cook him, and then a guy that he even has a slight advantage on, he'll play more aggressive. So it's just like he needs to get more confident. On number 41, Devin Booker.
Disappointing, but fair enough.
Yeah, same here. No complaints. Number 40, Luka.
Just because of all the hype, I could see Luka maybe a little bit higher with some of the names, but he's a rookie, so we still need to see a little bit more maybe. So still fair.
Yeah, that was exactly our mindset. Is I think that me and Jack said is like we didn't want to put him too high because he's just a rookie, and to have him already be like a top 35 player or whatever would just be like blasphemous. So we kind of thought like 40 was like a nice gap where he's not like just a 50, a top 50 player, but he's in the middle of the pack.
Yeah, and he struggled a little bit lately, so I feel like this spot is good for him. Now on to the next one, Mike Conley at number 39.
Fair enough.
Same here. Fair enough for me. 38, Chris Paul.
The injuries, I'm pretty sure that's what kicked him down. And I read the description, and that's basically what it said. But he's been looking phenomenal lately. And with his late performances, he might deserve some spots up. But we'll see how he fares in your guys' list by the end of the year.
Yeah, I think the health obviously is what kept him down, because if he was playing, he'd be better. And obviously, the beginning of the year, he wasn't great anyways. Number 37, De'Aaron Fox.
Good.
Same here. Good for me. Number 36, Donovan Mitchell.
Again, disappointing, but well ranked.
I think he's starting to come into his own.
Yeah, I know that this is a guy who I had a Twitter debate with either yesterday or the day before, and he was like, you have Donovan Mitchell lower than CJ McCollum. And it's a good argument because CJ McCollum doesn't have quite the workload as a Donovan Mitchell, doesn't necessarily have the same kind of value as Donovan Mitchell. Because obviously Donovan Mitchell's not playing. The Jazz probably don't have a lot of offense, whereas if McCollum's out, they have Lillard. So I think Mitchell is a guy I already have an asterisk next to, which we're probably going to have to readjust or at least look into farther. But at this point in time, this is where the Jazz were kind of just a little bit inconsistent. And I know this is, I think right after this is also when he started having those huge, the big win against the Bucks and some big time performances.
Yeah, I think that's, the role he plays in the offense is big. I'd probably have him up at least one spot over the next guy, who's Eric Bledsoe.
Yeah, I did want to say about Bledsoe, he could be a little bit lower depending on how you look at it, just because he's a big part of what the Bucks do, maybe not as big of a part as his teammate that is a couple of spots up, or even Giannis, who is obviously a top 5 guy. So I mean, I guess he's good there, but I could have him a couple of spots lower.
Yeah, I could see Bledsoe being lower as well, just because of the role he plays in the team, and obviously Malcolm Brogdon being another really good guard in that team too.
Yeah.
This range of D'Angelo Russell, Bledsoe, Mitchell, Fox, CP3 was probably the toughest rankings, that Kory and I had. We probably spent the most time chatting and fretting over. But I think Bledsoe, just purely because we valued the Milwaukee Bucks system and how good he has been in that. And, he's been a tremendous defender. He's had some really big performances. And I think that if you're picking out of players you would rather have right now, I would probably still have Bledsoe just over Mitchell, because I think Bledsoe can be a little more efficient, is a little bit better defensively. But you can certainly make the argument for guys like Fox, Chris Paul, and Donovan Mitchell as well.
Yeah, I think with Mitchell, though, would be like he's never actually had to have someone set him up, where Bledsoe obviously doesn't have as much pressure because he's playing with Giannis, he's playing with Middleton, he's playing with Brogdon, he's playing with Lopez even, where Mitchell's like in a lack of spacing offense where he's asked to do a lot. So I would personally take Mitchell over Bledsoe right now. Yeah,
the one thing I can say for Bledsoe, I mean, Jack pretty much nailed it all. Him having a career year offensively, him being the tremendous defender he is, with the Bucks being where they are in the standings, it kind of just felt like the perfect a combination for him to become, that 35th guy in the rankings. But you make a good point. I mean, Donovan Mitchell is a guy, like I said, we're going to have to really look into, because his role and what he has a 36% usage rate, which I wasn't aware of. I mean, that's ridiculously high.
Yeah.
So I think we'll definitely have to re-look at him when we do our end of the year rankings.
No, you know something, with so many guards in this spot, and like with Bledsoe not having nearly as big of a responsibility as the rest of the guys, that's something I hadn't really thought about. But he's been pretty good on the role that he's been asked to play thus far. So I mean, I can now see why you have him. Why you could even make an argument for him being a couple of spots higher. So it's good.
On to the next one, number 34, D'Angelo Russell.
I was about to complain about this one, but then I saw the numbers, and then I saw your guys' face, and I'm like, no, but he's averaging 20 on some nice splits, so well deserved. All-star too, so
his splits post Karis LeVert injury and his splits like post December are really incredible. Obviously, he slacked a little bit lately, but that's kind of adjusting to a different role. I'm happy with him in this spot. Anything from Kory or Jack?
Yeah, I think I'm mildly worried about his form since Spencer Dinwiddie's come back, but and Karis LeVert to an extent. He's been a little bit inefficient, but it's not necessarily a major worry, and probably doesn't take away from his standing on this list.
Yeah, I think the lineup change, obviously playing with different guys, is going to have an impact too. He's has to be a little bit more of a passer. On to number 33, and this is a guy that always feels like he's debated regardless, and that's Al Horford.
I think it's so tough because his numbers, they don't stand out when you see them. They're not like, oh, wow, big Al. But then when you think about what he does on the court, like it's actually, he's so important for the Celtics. So, I mean, I'm all in for the intangible, same things. We'll speak about Draymond Green in a couple of minutes.
It should be fun.
But I do value the intangibles. So I definitely see Horford in this spot.
Yeah, I like Horford in this spot. I think you just have to watch him to actually appreciate him instead of just looking at the box score.
That's exactly how I just want to say that. I think Al Horford's one of those guys you don't appreciate until you watch the Celtics play, and then you realize how much of their offense runs through him, how much of their defense revolves around him, switching and everything else. That was really something that we stuck out to when we put Al Horford at this spot.
I like that. I like that it's not just based on the numbers and like the public opinion or the general opinion. I like it that we have these intangibles. So great call, guys. Great call.
On to the next one, another Milwaukee Buck, number 32, Chris Middleton.
Good. All-star.
Yep. Good for me too. After that, we got CJ McCollum at 30. My mistake. Sorry, we got Nikola Vucevic at 31.
I think Vucevic could be a little bit higher. At least over CJ McCollum. Can get like to that top 30 because he's the main reason why the Magic are fighting for a playoff spot right now. Of course, it's been an all-around play and Jonathan Isaac showing up and Terrence Ross and whatnot. But I would have Vucevic at least in the top 30 over McCollum. I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, I'd probably do that too.
I think at the end of the day, when it comes to sort of like those sort of rankings between the subjective sort of players, at least when I came down to it, it's just like, who do I think is a better player? And I think CJ McCollum is a better player than Nikola Vucevic. He's done it for longer. I'm not saying that Vucevic can't do this for another season or two, but McCollum has been putting up, very solid numbers for the past 4 seasons or so, whereas Vucevic has had this sort of breakout. And how much do you reward this breakout season compared to consistency? And then, yes, it is based on this season. And I think McCollum has had a down season by his own standards. I know he was probably one of the guys that Kory and I debated a bit about because I wasn't high on him at all. But in terms of these two guys, McCollum's a better player than Vucevic, and I think that's basically it.
But I would say if we're basing it off this season, Vucevic has probably been better and more crucial for his team because also Vucevic gets the offense run through him sometimes at the elbow. It's not like he has a Dame Lillard. And to be honest, like CJ McCollum, I've watched him plenty this year where he has like a really good game and then he'll have like a terrible game where it's just like Dame trying to win the game by himself.
Yeah. I'm not too big of a CJ Oh, sorry to cut you off.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You're good.
Yeah, I'm personally not too big of a CJ McCollum fan. And I do want to give Vucevic more credit, just as Nick pointed out, because this season, like speaking this season exclusively, I think he's been big, like super big for the Magic, and I would like to see him personally in the top 30, at least over a name like McCollum. You can go ahead now, Kory.
Yeah, thanks. Vucevic was a tough guy to gauge. Obviously, I don't think we had him even. I think he might have been like in the 45 to 50 range on the first list we did. I don't think he was this high at all. So he already took a massive jump in the rankings. Okay. And obviously the Magic fighting for a playoff spot, he has to do a lot more for that team, obviously, than a guy like CJ McCollum. The one thing that CJ McCollum does do, though, Lillard obviously is the vocal point of the offense, but CJ McCollum is still the guy who gets the toughest defensive matchup every night for them. It's not Lillard who gets the top point guard on the other side. They put McCollum on him generally, and that's the guy who gets the tougher defensive assignments. Again, that's like you take that with a grain of salt to a degree. But I mean, you can definitely make a case that Vucevic has been better. Vucevic was an NBA All-Star this year. McCollum wasn't. It probably something we'll look into again. This one was tough. McCollum was a name that we talked about more so than any other name, I think, actually, when we did these rankings, talking about where should he fit in, because he's an interesting guy. Because the offense obviously runs through Lillard, and he's just we know how good he is and how important he is to that Portland team, because Portland's not a 4 or 5 spot in the West without McCollum being that partner in crime to Lillard. But it's tough to gauge at times.
Yeah, I think CJ for me is just having like not a great year, like you guys mentioned. I'd probably drop. It's not as much about Vucevic being better than him. I just think CJ is probably a little high. I would drop him down where that other set of guards is, like Jack talked about with the D'Angelo, the Bledsoe, the Donovan Mitchell, the De'Aaron Fox. Like in that range, I feel like he's more so in that range based off of this year. Previous years he's definitely been better, but I just haven't felt that same pop. And talking about his defense, I feel like his defense isn't where it was when he first, had his breakout season. He's focused a little bit more offensively. But enough about CJ. Number 29, Kyle Lowry.
I would like to see him higher. I think he should be higher. Like, I get he's been inconsistent during some stretches, but I mean, I don't want to name call the guys above him, but I could see him above some of the guys, or at least in a higher spot, just because the Raptors, he's been able to hold the showdown even when Kawhi sits, which I don't think is something easy to do. Of course, that's Pascal Siakam also deserves a lot of credit, and he's quite some spots over Lowry. And I personally would have Lowry over Siakam, which might be a hot take or whatnot. But I personally would like to see Lowry a bit higher, at least over Pascal.
I think Lowry, the thing for him is he just hasn't played in a ton of games. Like, he's missed a lot of time this year. So
that's it. Okay.
He might be playing well, but I think in terms of games played, like, that's what really hurts him.
Oh, then it makes perfect sense. Okay, I get it.
Anything from Kory, Jack? Good for.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the reason Pascal is so much higher is he's had the ball in a lot of his hands a lot of the time as well, and he has proven to be, a fulcrum at times for this Toronto team, and a very good Toronto team when, Kawhi is out. When Kawhi is there, Kyle Lowry's back injury obviously is a little bit worrisome in his health, but he is still one of the better defensive guards going around, and leaders as well. I think, despite the fact that, his bro is gone, he is still a great leader on this Toronto team. And with Kawhi Leonard is a reason why they've had so much success. But, I think health was probably the number one thing out of everything. But also, I'm a little bit worried about, his health going forward and this season as well. Could that affect him in the latter parts of the season, the playoffs as well?
Yeah, especially a back injury, which has been kind of lingering for a couple of years now. Something to keep an eye on. Former Toronto Raptor, DeMar DeRozan, number 28.
I'm not too big of a DeRozan fan, but with what he has done, I think it's fair enough.
He can just get buckets, man. Like, if you get him in the paint, he just scores. Like, it's pretty automatic. And, in a time where we don't really respect the mid-range game, he is very good at it. So I'm cool with this.
Yeah,
go ahead. You go, Kory. I don't want to speak over you because I'm mean enough to you already.
I was just going to say, DeRozan's usage has been extremely high in San Antonio. Obviously, San Antonio is a playoff team. DeRozan's playing the most minutes ever in his career as well. DeRozan's just called upon to do a lot more than he's ever done in his career in San Antonio. So that's what, to us, put him in the top 30. And we actually had a decent debate on, is DeRozan higher than Lowry, or is Lowry higher than DeRozan? And we actually both said Lowry is better than DeRozan, but because Lowry missed so much time, that's why DeRozan got the nod. Because realistically, I do think Lowry's probably a more impactful player than DeRozan.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
And with DeRozan, just finishing off, I can't remember who it was that put on Twitter. Imagine if DeRozan had just a below-average three-point shot and was a decent-ish defender. He would be possibly top 20 on this list and consistently. But obviously, those are really big what-ifs.
It's really surprising he hasn't become a better defender, considering he probably has the tools. But that's for an entire show. 27, Steven Adams.
I perfectly get why he's here, and maybe you could have him a little bit lower, but I understand at the end of the day. I think it's fair because of how successful the Thunder have been.
I think it's just like super consistent. You could argue probably a few spots down, but he just like does the same thing every single game. It's just like, yeah, I'm going to shoot a couple hooks, set a couple really good screens, and be a huge presence in the paint, and then also rebound the ball. And if he doesn't necessarily get the rebounding stats because Westbrook swoops in. He's an excellent boxer I guess.
And he's also the best offensive rebounding center in the NBA, or at least top 2. I think he may be second in like total offensive rebounds, but that was something that weighed in. He never misses time. Even when he gets like a sprained ankle, he still plays the next game. It feels like he's always out there for them. And like you said, Nick, he's just consistent. They can always depend on him for those easy baskets around the rim when Westbrook drives and dishes it off to him. He's there for the rebounds, a decent rim protector, and probably actually a slightly underrated defender at times.
Yeah, I feel like he probably wouldn't be as high if he wasn't an OKC system because they play geared kind of towards him and funnel everything his way. But in a different system, he might be lower. But I think the way he's playing, he's good at this spot. Number 26, LaMarcus Aldridge.
Good to go.
Yeah, I would maybe consider swapping him and DeMar. It's tough to say. Like, it feels like either one or two of these guys, one's playing well, one's playing bad. It's like they flip-flop spots all year long. So I think that's okay with me. Number 25, Draymond Green.
This is a tough one because of as I said, I personally value the intangibles of the game so much. And I think he's still a top 3, top 2 defender in the NBA just because he's so smart. And I don't know, like I could see him a couple of spots higher, but I can understand like the stats are disappointing. The 3-point shooting, it's plummeted. And I mean, I understand why he's here, but I personally could have him a little bit higher in my own list.
I think Draymond's probably one of the hardest players in the entire NBA to rank because of the team he plays on. If we saw him on another team and he had an amazing impact, we'd be like, all right, Draymond's definitely top 30. But I think that's why you can see the argument like, oh, he could be a couple spots higher, but you could also be like, yo, he's really not that great and he's just playing off a ton of all-stars. Like offensively, his game is pretty bad. Like the 7 assists is the one thing that sticks out, but his shooting has really dropped off. He's almost become like a negative offensive player in a sense when he's out there spacing the floor, especially when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. When you have a Steph, you have a Clay, you have a KD who are so high usage, and then DeMarcus. So I could see more so the argument for putting him down. I just, like I said, it's just probably one of the most difficult players in the entire league to rank based off the team he plays on.
Yeah.
You want to go first, Jack? You want me to go?
Come on, kill me.
This is one where it's like similar to Al Horford, where how do you gauge a guy who has so much impact but doesn't impact the box score as much as, the traditional sort of guys, LaMarcus Aldridge, whoever you want to talk about. I think Draymond is still one of the best defenders in the league, and when it comes down to it, him and Al Horford are the best sort of big man defenders going around and most switchable, versatile defenders in the league. And, on his day, Draymond is the best defender in the league. Him and Rudy Gobert. I would probably still take Draymond because he has the ability to switch on to the smalls. When it comes into the playoffs, that's where it's going to come a little bit trickier, the wings and such. So Draymond is still probably top 3 in defensive player of the year rankings, top 4, depending on how you want to gauge it. And I think he's defensive superstar. He's a defensive star. Probably outweighs the real drop off on the offensive end, which is mainly just the 3-point shot. He's just not shooting well anymore. And when it comes to the playoffs, that's going to be a key sticking point. Are they going to do what the Cleveland Cavaliers did to them and just go leave him open? And I think that's going to come down to that could affect their success in the postseason. But if we're basing it purely off right now, I still think that he's one of the top half players in the NBA today.
Yeah, I mean, because of the impact that he has in that roster, the fact that he's pivotal for their defense, obviously, as Jack mentioned, he can guard multiple positions. He's going to be a top 5 defensive player of the year candidate without a question. His ability to ball handle, his ability to set screens, to get Clay and Steph those kind of looks. It's at times tough to gauge him. The 3-point shot is terrible. I mean, when I watch him shoot, there's at least 1 or 2 shots a game that clanks off the front of the rim. Like, he doesn't even get there. And obviously, the form is not good. I got a better looking form. And that's not saying much. My form ain't great.
Kind of like the backpack.
yeah, right. He looks like he's shooting with a backpack on. So this was a tough guy to gauge. I still feel confident in him being a top 25 player, especially because the Warriors, if they remain as dominant as they have been, with Durant missing some time this year. Oh, Durant didn't miss that much time. Clay's missed time. Curry's missed time. Cousins obviously missed a ton of time. Draymond's been one of the more consistent guys. I know he did miss time, I think like an ankle injury. But he's been one of the most consistent guys, and he's crucial to what they do. Even though Steve Kerr is sick of Draymond shit, we over here respect and value him on at least the defensive side of the ball. So I think he's still top 25 for now. But who knows? When we do the end of season rankings, it might change.
Yeah, and obviously it provides that like extra grit. The one thing I guess you could sometimes say as a negative, sometimes a positive would be his emotions, keeping them in check, because obviously you don't want Tex and getting suspended. We know what happened in the finals a few years ago. But like we could talk about Draymond for a long time. We've talked about it on pods where he doesn't even exist. But on to the next one, Tobias Harris at number 24. Probably the biggest jump from season to season, if you ask me.
Yeah, I mean, as much as I would like to have him higher.
Sorry to cut you off, Jorge.
No, don't worry. Sorry. But as I was saying, as much as I would like to have him higher, the names above him are just like, I think it's impossible to push him up, but he does deserve a ton of credit for what he did early with the Clippers and now the transition into the Sixers. But it's fair. The way it is, it's fair.
No complaints over here. He's improved his game, super efficient, perfect fit in the Sixers offense. No thoughts. Kory, Jack?
No, this was, to me, for both of us, obviously his role with the Clippers was a lot bigger, and he really showcased his skill set. And then when he went to the Sixers, it was curious to see who was going to be like kind of the odd man out offensively. And he's actually been more of an offensive threat than Jimmy Butler at this point, and Ben Simmons. He's kind of like the second scoring option for them behind Embiid. So it just goes to show you that when it comes to getting buckets, Tobias Harris is the real deal.
Yep. Kory said it all.
Yeah, excellent complimentary piece in terms of what they need him to do. Probably not surprising, but probably a drop-off from last year would be Klay Thompson at number 23.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. Once again, with the names above him, there's not much else you can do. I would like to see him above Pascal, though. Like, maybe you can switch him. We talked about Siakam already, but, I think Klay could be in that 22 spot, maybe behind Jimmy. But for the range and taking into account the early season slump that he was in, I think it's still a fair ranking. It's crazy that the Warriors have 3 players in the top 25 when you think about it.
Yeah, it is crazy. That's why they're amazing. Yeah, I would probably agree with Jorge. Maybe swap him with Siakam, but other than that, I'm pretty happy where he's at.
Yeah, the early slump in the season definitely affected him. Also, just being kind of the odd man out in the offense. Obviously, we didn't try and put too much into that because that's just how the Warriors are. But it just feels like some nights he's either on fire or really cold. And obviously, defensively, though, he's still probably one of maybe the best two-way shooting guard in the NBA today when you're looking at guys who can defend and score at will. But he just fell a little bit short for us. And Siakam, I think, has been more impactful for what the Raptors have done. That's why I think Siakam's been slightly better. And
he's better with the ball in his hands, and I value that incredibly highly. Like, you can give Pascal Siakam the ball in his hands, he's going to drive on you. Whereas I think Klay Thompson has improved in that area. We have Pascal high, but obviously there's going to be talking points from any sort of list. So you back up it with your general opinions and stuff based on it. But Klay Thompson is still, what was the stat today? One of the only players ever to do 203 7 seasons in a row or something like that. That's just insane.
The only other player besides Steph Curry
it's pretty wild.
I think the one thing that, obviously Siakam's better with the ball, but Klay provides a different type of gravity that only very few players in the NBA have other than him and like Steph. He's just a guy that you do not want to see him knock down 2 threes in a row because the game might just be over. So I think Klay just has that like super smash option where he just can go boom, and then like the game is literally over because like, okay, Klay Thompson's on fire. We've seen him do it with limited touches too. So number 22, Pascal Siakam.
Well, we talked about him. I already bashed him, so.
I think Siakam, though, is just an amazing jump on the season. It'd be really interesting to see what he would do without a very good team, because I think sometimes that gets lost in the equation talking about Toronto. Obviously, Lowry and Kawhi have missed time, but Toronto still overall has a lot of good players in that team. Not amazing, but a lot of good guys. On to number 20, Australian Ben Simmons.
Skip Jimmy Butler, bro.
Oh, my bad.
21.
I just kind of forgot about him in Philly.
21. Yeah, the fit in Philly, it has been awkward. Ever since they made that trade, I wasn't like too happy for him. Like, of course, everybody wanted to see him out of Minnesota, but I don't think Philadelphia was really the way to go. Like, where where his talents could really be optimized for that matter. So I understand like kind of like the slight drop off. Because I think generally we could have him higher last season.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
don't know if you agree with me.
Philly hasn't been amazing for him, and I think he's just a guy that benefits from having the ball a little bit more. So I think this is a fine spot for Jimmy.
I actually think, just want to say that I think since we've made this list, I think I would even maybe drop him lower. I think you can make a point that like Clay, Siakam, even, and maybe even Tobias Harris have all been better at this junction of the season. But maybe we'll revisit that. But because he hasn't been, as Jorge mentioned, obviously a standout player with Philly. He's kind of fallen into the backdrop. Obviously, he's extremely important to what they want to accomplish this season, but he hasn't necessarily been the Jimmy Butler that we saw in Chicago or expected to see in Minnesota or expected to see in Philly.
Yeah, in our preseason list, he was 11th ahead of Lillard, George, and stuff. So a drop to 20th. I think all the things in Minnesota, all the things happening in Philly, his value has certainly decreased, but still an incredibly talented player, two-way player, and one of the best of those in the league.
Yeah, and he still does the small things. He's a hustle guy. Like he'll go out and he brings some real grit to your team. Now to Ben Simmons at 20.
Yeah, fair enough. Like until he doesn't get a jump shot, it will be hard to see him like get much further. Like obviously he's an amazing playmaker and he's a monster in terms of like what he can do with his height and the handle and the dunking and the layups. But until he doesn't get at least a reliable free throw jump shot, like man, every point guard these days can shoot. So I think it's fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I think his two-way ability sticks out. He's a monster in transition. If you don't get ahead of him, he's almost a guaranteed bucket at the rim. So I like Ben Simmons here. Obviously, I've always been kind of high on him. 19, Kemba Walker.
He deserves to be a top 20 guy for everything that he's doing for Charlotte. No doubt.
Yeah, fine by me. He's pretty much put the team on his back, so that's been fun for them. Number 18, Bradley Beal.
He deserves to be here for everything that he's doing for the Wizards without John Wall. Like I think a lot of people just thought of Bradley Beal like kind of like the second Riddle. I don't know if you call it for John Wall, but I think he's really demonstrating that an offense can be ran through him. And I just love to see Bradley Beal doing it, like and keeping still the efficiency up in an increased role. I love what he's doing, and he deserves 100% to be here.
Yeah, I was once told that Bradley Beal wasn't a good offensive player, but that's for another day. Kory knows what I'm talking about. But moving on to number 17, Karl Anthony Towns, who's been playing really well lately.
I'm a big Towns fan. I would like to see him higher, but the names above him once again, hard to complain. So he's good. I'm convinced he'll be a top 10 player in the NBA. Maybe not next season, but in 2-3 years, especially if he finds a way out of Minnesota and if he finds the right situation, he's a top 10 guy without a question in my mind. I really like Towns.
Yeah, I mean, if he can pick up the defensive end, which I think is an area where he's been inconsistent, and obviously if he didn't have the big slump to start the year, the whole Jimmy Butler drama, he would probably be spots higher, but I think this is good to go. Number 16, Jrue Holiday.
I love to see him here. He deserves to be here. No complaints.
No complaints from me either. Number 15, Rudy Gobert.
He's good. There might be an argument that you can drop him down, but I think just what he brings on defense is, his value on that end is so high that he does deserve to be a top 15 player.
I think kind of gets lost in translation is the fact that he's such a good rim roller. Like if he's around the rim, you can just throw the oop to him because he's so big. It's that vertical spacing that only certain guys in the league can provide you. So I like Gobert here a lot. Blake Griffin at number 14.
He's been amazing this season. There's not much else I can say.
Yeah, I might boost him over Westbrook because I think he might have been better across the year where Westbrook's finally starting to get his efficiency back now.
Oh, and here comes my old friend, Russell Westbrook.
Well, talking about that, so Westbrook obviously is next spot up. Would you swap these two or you like them where they're at, Jorge?
I like what I've seen from Westbrook lately. Especially the efficiency. Like at the start of the year, it might have been worse than what I said before the season started. But now that he's like actually picking his spots and feeding more, Paul George and Jeremy Grant and Steven Adams, and him being more selective with the kind of shots he takes, I love that. I love that Russell Westbrook.
Yeah, he's definitely picked it up since that's not nice start. Obviously, Paul George was the big key. Any thoughts from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, we didn't necessarily forecast that Russell Westbrook would be shooting, 37% from three and 45-ish% from the field following the All-Star break. But it works out well for us. And I think Blake Griffin has had.
Jack, are you lying to us now?
No. Blake Griffin has had an insane season. There was early buzz for him in the first sort of month or so as an MVP candidate, and he's maintained that consistency. I think that the last sort of few games for Detroit have shown that there's been a major drop off, but I think that they'll get back. They'll still solidify their spot purely because of Blake Griffin and his individual brilliance.
Yeah, this is an interesting debate, obviously, because Blake Griffin, I know I was really low on him coming into this year. And he's obviously been phenomenal. He's had full stat lines. He does it all. The recent slump with Detroit kind of, lowers it slightly. And despite Westbrook being, a 27% 3-point shooter on the year, even early on when he was shooting so bad, and I get it, the stat line, the triple doubles, you can make what it is. But when you're averaging a triple double, I think it puts you in the top 15, at least that top 15 mark. And then just for the fact that if you watch the Thunder's game, the impact and kind of what you mentioned, Nick, when it comes to Klay Thompson and the gravitational pull he has on the court, that's Westbrook. When Westbrook's on the floor, you just feel him out there. You're constantly thinking and worrying about what?
You feel him for the good and the bad.
Right. Yeah. The 4 for 20 nights and all that come in between. But I think I still give it to Westbrook because also what's been to me one of the biggest things about Westbrook this year is despite the inefficiency, he's become an above average defender, which we haven't really seen in years past. Obviously, he still gambles a lot. He is a lot of steal or bust at moments where he's going for a steal, and if he gets it, good. If he doesn't, that guy's probably going to get a bucket. But I think him raising his play on that side of the court is what kept him in this spot for me. And then, if you start adding an efficient jump shot, he might even get a few spots higher before the season's over.
Yeah, I think I'm looking purely for the whole season. I just think Blake has probably had to do more in terms of literally putting the team on his back, not having many great players. Obviously, they picked it up lately, getting shooters, and that's helped him. But I just think like Russ, there's just so much good and bad that I think Blake has been more good than bad this year. And then also with the Russ thing, you mentioned the gambling. Sometimes he just really has some bad basketball IQ plays where he just like doesn't pay attention. That game last night against the Pacers, they win that game because he doesn't box out Wesley Matthews.
Oh,
yeah.
So that's just something to consider with Westbrook. I think this, we're fighting over inches right now because it's like 14 and 15 or 13 and 14. So on to the next one at number 12, Dame Lillard.
I'm not a big fan, but he deserves to be here.
Yeah, and you're the first.
How can a person not be a fan of Damian Lillard? Like, what is there against his game, against his personality that grates with you?
You want me to explain that? Like,
he's like, you really want it? Yeah.
I'll tell you a story. I'm not a big fan of people taking difficult shots, and I see the type of shots that Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum take, and I just like I'm about to bomb it every time I see all of the moving threes and the contested mid-range shots. But the thing is, this guy makes them. So there's not much I can complain about. At the end of the day, I just don't like the inefficient. Like, I think he could be much better if he was more selective with the type of shots he does. That's why I've been so critical about Russell Westbrook at the end of the day. But still, he deserves a lot of credit. So
yeah, I think Dame, you can make the fact about some of the inefficient shots, but I think you look at it as like, he gets tired because there aren't guys on his team creating other than CJ. Like, Nurkic is doing his thing, but a lot of time he's getting set up or he's getting hit in the post on like a mismatch. So I think Dame taking some bad shots is okay. I'm happy with him at this spot.
And inefficient, just quickly, 45% from the field, 37% from three, 91% from the line on 26 points a game.
I didn't mean inefficient
about the bad shots. Like, he could get that percentage even higher if he, subtracted some of the bad shots. But like I said,
exactly,
take them.
Yeah, I think he's a good bad shot taker. I think out of him and like Stephen Curry is the best in the league, but I think Damian Lillard is the second best at making bad shots. Okay, maybe third behind James Harden.
Yeah. I mean, we could talk about this all day. Number 11, Anthony Davis.
I read what the description said about the minutes restrictions and everything, but I don't get how we can have Anthony Davis outside the top 10, even with his minutes coming down after the All-Star break.
I do.
Have you seen what this guy's doing? Like, the other day, I got him for like 6K in fantasy, and he dropped like a 50 burger or something. Like, he's a permanent monster. And like, I understand the situation in New Orleans and everything, but I would like to see him in the top 10. Like, for me, He was even a top 5 guy in my list when we started the season. So
now, again, I mean, this is a guy who, when we do like an end of season, or like we're doing like based solely on career wise, he's top 5. He's arguably top 3. For us, you know, this was obviously, it felt weird putting Anthony Davis outside the top 10. It's not like I'm for sure saying, yo, everyone above Anthony Davis, way better than Anthony Davis. Because it's not true. Anthony Davis is the better player. But you take in account the fact he's on a minute restriction, you know, generally not playing more than 20 minutes, not playing any more back-to-backs. And that's been going on since the second week of February. So, and he's, you know, you put all that into account, and we still got another month left of the season. I can't say I can't put a guy who's barely playing in the top 10 when we're doing a season-based stats. For me personally,
but I mean, that's not his fault.
You have to take in the fact,
it is his fault. Oh no! It is his fault. No one told him to demand a trade. That's on him.
Yeah, he also ruined the vibe of the squad. Like, he had a negative impact on the team. Like, it's off the court stuff, but it's still impacting them. And I think a big argument you've heard from New Orleans fans is like, Anthony Davis is so good. He's such a top 5 player. He's not making his teammates better, and they weren't in the playoffs. And he was healthy for a majority of the time before they weren't in the playoffs. Like, they had a lot of injuries, but I think a lot of people are just like, all right, he doesn't necessarily get us those W's when we really need him to.
I mean,
I wish I had Jorge in a meme form or like a GIF.
Yeah, I cannot argue with that type of logic. Okay, so, well, I guess let's get into the top 10 then.
Number 10. This isn't released yet, so you can't find it on the website, only on the show until probably this weekend.
Yeah.
Nikola Jokic at number 10.
You know, I'm not the biggest Jokic fan, but with everything that he's doing for the Nuggets, MVP candidate for some, not for me. Yeah, that's a hot take. We'll talk about that in another outlet episode. But he deserves to be here. He's not a top 10 player for me yet, but I can see why everybody has him there. I'm not high on him at all. I don't dislike him, but there's something about him that doesn't. I don't feel like he's a guy that you can build on long term. But like, this is talking about the season, so I get why he's here.
Don't check Jokic, Lillard. Who's next? LeBron James? Wow, wait.
Oh,
I think like you got Jokic the season he's having. Like, he's been amazing. He's made his teammates better. They're running the offense through him. They dealt with a lot of injuries. You can't even throw an injury excuse at Jokic because they've missed almost like every significant player on their team for some stretch of time. So Jokic is cool in my book. I think there's probably even an argument if someone wanted to say he's higher. Like, I'm not that person, but I wouldn't be mad if someone was like, "Hey, Jokic has been one of the best players in the league. Check those stats, boy."
Yeah. And the Nuggets are the 2 seed in the West for a reason, despite all the injuries. They've been able to navigate the injuries because Jokic has been so. That was fucking so smooth the way I said his name. So him being nearly
came with some wisdom.
Him normally being a triple-double machine, not triple-double machine, but like pretty much garnering a triple-double stat line most nights, and his impact, like Nick mentioned, we thought without a doubt he had to be a top 10 player.
Yeah, I like it. Jack, any thoughts?
Yeah, he's had a top 10 season. He might not be a top 10 player, but he's had a top 10 season quite easily. Yeah. And you could rank him better than guys ahead of him on this list in terms of the season that he's had and MVP sort of thing, like Jorge was saying. But he's a top 10 player this season. He might not be next season. He might not be the season after that, but he is producing and he's been healthy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most interesting topics to talk about. Obviously not today, but how Jokic progresses and if he gets better. I think there's obviously something physically he can do to make himself better, but like I said, another day. Number 9, Kyrie Irving, and he's having a really good season. Like, obviously there's been all that drama that's kind of headlined everything, but if you take a peek at his stats, ooh.
His defense has been good.
Thank you. I was waiting so we could mention this. Yeah, he's been really good defender, a little bit better than Damian Lillard. That's all I got on that front.
Yeah, I think he's fair. He's fair at this spot. I could even throw him maybe above Kawhi. Maybe
that kind of defense.
yeah, but I mean. Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll just call it quits. He's good at number 9.
No, but really, Kyrie's having a really good year. I think obviously the fact that he's such an elite closer puts him a little bit higher than maybe you even wanted to be. But Joel Embiid at number 8.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think there's maybe even an argument for up, just considering how bad Philly was without him. Obviously, the list came after those games, but I'm a big Joel guy.
Highest big man on this list.
Yeah. So best big man in the league, I'm assuming from you guys.
Yes.
Yep.
I think that's a lot.
Whoa! Wait a second, right there. But like, are you considering Anthony Davis in that?
No, he's not. I don't consider Anthony Davis.
He's a big this year, and Joel Embiid's been better than him this year.
He has been better than him this year. It's just like it's pure. It's circumstantial, Jorge, and like if these circumstances weren't around him, Anthony Davis was 4th in our list in the preseason, so he would probably still be around that mark. But circumstances forbid Anthony Davis being any higher than he really was. Could have easily had him actually lower based on like general production stats, what he's done this season. Joel Embiid has been an absolute monster.
I think Joel Embiid has just been more dominant this year, where Davis is doing things, but it's not resulting in wins. Where like Embiid in the post at times has just caused a ton of problems and really has like made an entire Philadelphia team better.
My favorite stat is the fact that Joel Embiid has numbers that we haven't seen since Shaq when it comes to points and rebounding. And as we know, Shaq was one of the most, if not the most dominant center of all time, because you couldn't guard him. And
one of the most dominant players, not even the centers.
And we've seen that from Embiid. I mean, that putback dunk he had the other night was absolutely ridiculous. There's only so many centers who can do that in the league in general. And his ability to protect the rim as well as his ability to drive. I mean, Embiid can literally Euro step to the rim. The 3-point shot
skills at that size.
Yeah, and the fact that he hasn't even been playing basketball that long either, which is another thing that's always fun to remember. The fact that he missed 2 years with a foot injury, he's been incredible. That's why we have him 8, and he has been the best big man this season. Obviously, too, when it comes to like the Anthony Davis thing, like we're going like head-to-head, Davis is better than Embiid, but also it depends on if you see Davis as a power forward or a center, because there's always been that debate is, who is he really? But in today's small ball, he is probably a center.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to take this one.
That he's been better than AD this year. Ask me next year, it could be a different answer. Number 7, Kawhi Leonard.
Yeah, this is where I figured out he should be, and that's his spot.
And I think if Kawhi actually didn't miss a ton of time, you could maybe make an argument for him to be a little bit higher. But the fact is that he's like playing, which feels like every other game. Obviously, he's playing more than that. This is a good spot for him.
Yes.
All right, number 6, Paul George.
That's a big surprise, but he deserves to be here.
I think you make an argument that he could even be above the next guy based purely off this season, but it's hard. Yeah, I mean,
who's the next guy? Wait. Oh, LeBron.
Oh no, it's just the king.
Just King James, no big deal. But I think I would probably make the argument for Paul George having a better season. LeBron's missed so much time. Paul George obviously plays defense, one of the top defensive players. The only thing LeBron has on Paul George this year and in general, in terms of this season, would be playmaking.
The one thing that for me took away from Paul George is he's had 24 games in which he shot under 40% this year.
Wow, look at that for a stat.
Yeah, it was actually because somebody was. Let
me check my stats real quick. I got 35 games where LeBron didn't play defense. No,
it's fair. I mean, that's literally the argument between Paul George and LeBron, right? If you're gonna pick out the fact that Paul George has had these really bad shooting nights quite often this year, and then you flip to the side where LeBron has missed time. Obviously, he's also had the lack of defense. We gave LeBron getting 5. This was kind of out of courtesy. I feel like to a degree, because it's LeBron James, and we obviously know he's still quote unquote the best player in the league. He missed time. Obviously, he can't be too far for me personally out of the one spot. So we put him 5th because he missed time. And obviously, the Lakers, when he was healthy, that first stint were extremely good, which helped. His stat lines are still good. He still puts up the numbers. That's a funny thing. Even that last stretch right before they decided they were going to go full tank mode, he was putting up solid numbers every night. You can say what you want about the defense. He doesn't play every defensive possession. When you're in year 16, you get some slight passes. But the Paul George LeBron debate, it's a serious thing for this season in particular.
I think the age is actually impacting him a little bit more than people want to admit, because it's not even just taking off defensive possessions. He takes off offensive stretches for games where he's just like, I'm going to let the other guys do things. Not saying it's wrong. He's just trying to do the best that he can. But I think it is having some impact where, all right, LeBron's just going to sit in the corner for a couple of possessions, or he's going to sit on the wing just because he needs to kind of get some more gas.
You know something I do want to point out is I think the standards that we have set for LeBron are so high, like literally greatest of all time. Those are the standards we have set for him, and that's why we kind of see it as disappointing. But you look at the numbers and you look at what he does on the court, and he's an absolute monster. Of course, the injuries and everything. I get why it's a debate, but like for me, it's hard. It hurts ranking LeBron at number 5. But when you look at it, like this particular season, you could argue that he probably belongs maybe a little bit lower. And but once again, it comes back to the expectations and the ways, how the other guys are performing, especially Paul George, getting closer into that small forward conversation. But
it'd be interesting to see where he lands at the end of the year, especially considering the Lakers' record. And now you guys are going to take in the fact of the minutes restriction, obviously negatively impact AD.
Yeah,
now,
it's going to be bad.
KD. Well, let me give you the rest of the top 5. It just makes more sense to do it this way. Number 4, KD. Number 3, Steph Curry. Number 2, James Harden. And number 1, Antetokounmpo.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about KD, right?
Well, talk about him.
There you go. That's your top 4. KD, Curry, Harden, Antetokounmpo.
I like that you put KD at number 4 because even though he might be, we've heard this discussion all the time. We don't even know who the best player in the Warriors is, but I think that to me it's pretty clear that Curry's way more impactful, and that's why he deserves to be a number 3. Like, I've talked wonders about him already, like the gravity he has, the shooting, of course, the playmaking, even though his efforts on defense. He deserves a lot more credit than he gets. He might get some, a lot of shit more than he deserves. So I like seeing the KD and then Curry. Obviously, the top 2 guys you cannot argue because the numbers. So I already went ahead and talked about the top 4, but I'm super happy with the way the top 5 is.
Yeah, I think the top 4 is pretty much how you would have it. People are going to argue Steph and KD. Maybe you say KD's, actually has more assists than Curry this year and has been a better defender. But overall, I think that's fine. I think there's probably a slight argument for maybe James Harden over Antetokounmpo, but then you look at Antetokounmpo's defense. So I think top 4 I'm happy with. That's probably my favorite part of the list, I guess.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, so, I really liked it. The top 10 was really good. Like, I didn't know it.
Oh yeah, you didn't.
I didn't know. I now I know, and I'm actually pretty satisfied. It eliminated all the complaints that I had.
Satisfied is how lots of people around me describe their feelings, Jorge. Let's put it that way.
Honestly, though, I think the top 10 is nailed. I would have a hard time imagining somebody else trying to put somebody else in the top 10. I think the guys you put in the top 10 are locks. Anthony Davis thing, the way we discussed and the way we rank the players, I think it's fair that he's not in the top 10. So that alone is a lot of credit for you guys because, the other stuff, 30 through 50 is all going to be opinion based. Different people are going to be like, Trae Young should be in there or Lou Will, like the guys we talked about. But I think the most important thing is the top 10, and the top 10 is nailed.
Yeah, I don't think people I don't think people realize how hard I don't think people realize how hard it is to actually put a top 50 list, not only based on opinion, but actually give an explanation to each of the guys. So major props to both Kory and Jack. I think for a single person, it's a crazy task to do. So it's a great job by both of you.
The fun thing about doing this list with Jack is that we can kind of balance off when we're too high or too low on a person by just talking about it. So I know the Andre Drummond, for example, just one guy we didn't have on the list, and Spencer Dinwiddie, who I had lower and Jack had higher. When you can just be able to bounce ideas and kind of dissect the guy's game with somebody else rather than just sitting there in your own thoughts and having your own personal bias on the player, it really helps to try and get some kind of cohesion for the list.
Yeah, you guys on your own too. I didn't even chirp.
I give Kory way too much ish, but he's the homie. We work well together. We're a dynamic duo. We do our thing. Jay comes right before K.
We're Shaq and Kobe before the breakup.
Well, hopefully we don't see the breakup. But guys, like we said, great list, great show. Jorge, pleasure having you on. Kory, as always, Jack. Check us out, iTunes, Blog Talk Radio, OTGBasketball.com, Google Play, Dash Radio, and YouTube. Check out the list on OTGBasketball.com. Check out OTG's Twitter for a giveaway.